Visual Studio 2026 with Mads Kristensen.
The Azure and Devops podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using the latest in .NET, Azure, AI, and DevOps. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. The show is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm. Find them at www.clearmeasure.com. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. My guest today on the show is Mads Kristensen. He is a principal product manager on the Visual Studio team at Microsoft, where he champions developer productivity, performance, and extensibility. He has a deep passion for streamlining the development experience, and he's created dozens of widely used Visual Studio extensions, including Web Essentials, file nesting, Markdown Editor, and he maintains the Extensibility Essentials toolkit to empower other developers to build better tools. Mads brings over a decade of experience in web development on the Microsoft platform, and he's also the founder of schemastore.org and a home automation enthusiast. He's known for his engaging presentations and hands-on insights, and is a frequent speaker at developer conferences all around the world. He lives in the Pacific Northwest, and his mission is simple: to make Visual Studio the most delightful development experience on the planet. And with that, Mads, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm really excited for this because this is the first time I've had you on the podcast. But at the same time, we've known each other for a long time, and you've been really a huge mover and shaker in the Visual Studio tools world. And we're getting a new Visual Studio.
Yay!
But before we get into that, for people who are just getting to know you for the first time, I always like to go back in time. And what are the kind of the formative, pivotal moments that steered you in this direction, where you've spent a good chunk of your career on tools to help other people write code?
Well, I think so. Before I joined Microsoft, doing that, I was a web developer, and I worked in startups and enterprise company as well as a software engineer, front-end team, web developer, right? And then I became a team lead, at which point Microsoft had reached out and asked if I wanted to come work on Visual Studio. And at that point, I'd already worked on Visual Studio for 10 years professionally as a user of Visual Studio. And so this was a dream come true. I got to work on, this was on the ASP.NET team. So I got to work on the web part of Visual Studio, the HTML editor, CSS, all that stuff, JavaScript. And this was the stuff I was working on. So in the beginning, my motivation was pretty much like, what features do I want as a web developer? And that has actually continued quite a bit. So now it's different. Now it's like I'm doing all types of development, desktop and APIs and whatnot. And I always consider myself as a user of the product, and that I also build for myself. But I think over the years, I've kind of learned to take on kind of other people's maybe needs and wants a little bit and internalize them. But a lot of it comes from like, I would like this feature. It would be cool if Visual Studio could do, blank.
Right.
So I think it's key. Like if you're your own customer, I think there's an intrinsic kind of motivation to make it better. And so I very much have that.
Fantastic. Well, Visual Studio has come a long way. So the huge announcement that just recently got pushed out, a new Visual Studio. For people who are hearing this for the first time, what's the rundown?
Yeah, well, it's 4 years in the making, right? It's been 4 years since we got the last major version of Visual Studio. So the reason we cut a major version, like why even have a major version? Why not just keep updating the ones that exist, right? Is usually because there's some sort of change that breaks backwards compatibility. That is usually why we cut a new version. And so in 2022 version, it was the move to 64-bit.
Yeah, that was big.
That was a huge architectural thing. It broke all extensions. You can, it was a big deal. And so we had to create a new version of Visual Studio because of that. So this time around is a little bit different. It's actually, there's a lot of smaller reasons, But instead of just having one big architectural, it's like a lot of different reasons. And part of it has to do with performance. Part of it has to do with how we integrate AI deeper into the product. And part of it has to do with subscriptions and licensing and so on. And so like it's a mismatch of different reasons. But I'm really glad we do it because it allows us to move some goalposts that have otherwise been a little bit hard to do, because when we're talking about a major version, we want to create these big moments that makes you, hey, this is why you want the new version. Here's a big thing for you to consider, right? Mm-hmm. And so it allows us to like have those bigger features, bigger changes to come in. But this time around, we're not breaking backwards compatibility. And so it's for the first time in Visual Studio.
Not even with the ARM processors, that's not a issue like it was with x64?
Nope.
Awesome.
No.
Awesome.
It's all great. So all the features that went into x86 also comes in for ARM 64.
Okay.
So there's no, or x64 rather, but all that is everyone gets the benefit here. Yeah.
Nice.
So it's kind of cool. But for the first time in Visual Studio history, the new major version of Visual Studio is compatible with all the extensions that works for the previous version of Visual Studio. So you probably remember, like, when you get a new version of Visual Studio, you're like, hey, where's my favorite extensions? They're not ready.
Yeah.
And you have to wait for the extension author to update the extension to make it available for whatever the new major version is. This time around, that's not the case. Any extension that works on VS 2022 also works on 2026. And you can install it just like you would any other extension.
Yeah.
So that's a real nice thing. So backwards compatibility is actually higher here than probably it ever was before. Also in terms of settings, it takes all your settings from 2022. It takes your components from the installer. So if you're a .NET developer, you might have ASP.NET and desktop computing as your workloads. And so when you install 2026, it will see what components were installed with 2022. Let me mirror that. And so what's really nice is that you get everything you need like really quickly. And so you're from you click the download button till you write your first line of code in 2026 is a very short amount of time. And everything is set up. So you're kind of productive from the get-go. You have your extensions, your settings, your components, you're ready to go.
For a long time, well, I guess .NET Core separated the concept of the SDK that you were using and then the IDE. So with Visual Studio 2026, is it still true that if you're on .NET 8 or .NET 9, one team member could be using 26 and one team member could still be using 22?
Yep. So we call it like your solution will roam. Yep, that's still the case. If you want to take advantage of .NET 10 and C# 14, the full aspect of C# 14, you need 2026.
Now, a lot of people have kind of wondered, and publicly in forums, what's going on with Visual Studio? Because 2022, as the years tick on, it's like, that's an old number, and I see a whole lot of love being given to VS Code. Are they at some point going to force me to use it? So, what's the strategy inside Microsoft on these two maybe dueling editors? Yeah,
they might appear to be dueling. And it is true that there are gray areas where, for the same type of development, you can choose one or the other. But for the most part, we kind of keep the scenarios separate. And so for Visual Studio, the IDE, its main purpose is to be the best developer experience for C# and C++ developers.
Okay.
So that is the premier. Yeah, that's the premier place on Windows.
Okay.
On Windows.
Got it.
Because Visual Studio runs on Windows only.
Right.
So if you are not on Windows, we recommend VS Code. If you are not writing C# or any .NET or C++, but let's say you're a JavaScript developer or Python or Go or Rust or something, we recommend VS Code. So there's like a kind of a clear separation. But then you have all the kind of the gray area. Like we have the C# dev kit for VS Code. So we do have the way to have solutions and projects and a bunch of tooling around C# and .NET Core in VS Code. And so if you prefer that, if that makes you happier than using Visual Studio, the IDE, then by all means do that. But we believe, and the way we work toward this is that the premier experience is going to be in Visual Studio specifically for C#, .NET, and C++.
Okay, that helps to really clarify things. So if I'm restating that, JavaScript, you're going to get the best experience in VS Code. With .NET, you can get by with VS Code, but .NET is the best in full Visual Studio.
Yes.
All right, that helps. That helps clear things up. Fantastic.
And so VS Code is, because of its extensive plugin model, and there's so many extensions out there, it's pretty much everything but .NET, C# and C++. We pointed VS Code. And so even with this narrower scope of Visual Studio, our user base is growing. And so you might think, oh, we're letting VS Code take over a lot of the users, and so we should be dropping in our active user base, but we're not. We're growing. We've never had more users of VS than we do today.
Yeah. Well, and I find myself using Notepad less and less because, I just open with VS Code for just any text file. So you're getting, I'm in your numbers there. So
yeah. There's we have a lot of people that use both. We know that. And I'm one of them. I use both of them, but for different things.
Right.
So you part of your question was, it seems like VS Code gets more love. So we hear this all the time. There's a couple of reasons why. So one is you hear a lot of its surface area is larger, right? Because it is all these different languages. So whenever a new language come out, they're going to have a plugin for VS Code first, or maybe only for VS Code, not for VS at all, right? And so then you hear about it that way. And so just because the surface area is larger, it's wider. It's not deeper, it's wider. So that's one reason. Another reason is, especially with AI these days, it seems like all the features come to VS Code first. Like they get all the new LLM models first and so on. And that is true. It does. But a big part of that is because Visual Studio ships quarterly and VS Code ships monthly.
Okay.
So we work on the features almost at the same time, the two teams, VS and VS Code, for, let's say, incorporating a new feature for Copilot. But theirs will ship, in 10 days, whenever their release vehicle allows them to. And ours will be in 2 months and 10 days, because that's our release vehicle.
Right.
And so that's why this summer we changed Visual Studio's release cadence to be monthly instead of quarterly.
So that difference is no longer.
That difference, it's still there. It's just very short. Like it might be a week.
Oh, yeah. That's nothing.
In some cases, right? It kind of depends on what it is. And also, it's not the same. So the same feature might be implemented differently between VS and VS Code. Just because there's a fundamental difference in how the two understand the context and the different UI metaphors that are being used and stuff. Visual Studio is very visual. Like we have tool windows. We have all sorts of visual things. In VS Code, you have the command palette, and that's kind of your interaction model. And so there's just some fundamental differences. And so the implementation is sometimes different. And therefore, there could be difference in timings on when something ships. Okay. And in Visual Studio 2026, we have a much deeper implementation of Copilot or AI understanding, let's say, deep into Visual Studio. So what's really unique about Visual Studio and IDE over, like, let's say, a text editor with a lot of extensions is that the IDE understands everything. It understands the profiler, the debugger, the IntelliSense, unit testing, issue tracking, source control, your Azure deployment environments, and so on and so forth. And so if we can tap into all of that, we can give you a much better experience using with Copilot, because we have your context. We understand more of the same things you understand. We are much more a peer. That Copilot is more a peer with you than before. It doesn't have to guess something. It knows how all these things are, and then can recommend things based on it. And with an editor that has extensions, that's, it can't really be the case, because all those different extensions, they don't know about each other, and Copilot don't know about all of them. And so that's like that's a major difference. So you'll see a bunch of different Copilot features that will come out that will be exclusive to Visual Studio. For instance, the one that we're shipping with in 2026 as the first one that uses this new deeper integration is the profiler agent that allows you to do things you were not able to before, which is profile your application, figure out where the hot paths are, like what are expensive methods to call or lines of code, either because they allocate too much memory or because they use a lot of CPU. And then Copilot will help you optimize those. And this is something that can be so low level that a lot of people can't. They wouldn't be able to do it before. And so this is one of those examples where Copilot can come in and help you open the door and help walk you through that door. And now you've learned more. It shows you what it did and you learn from it. So the next time you come into a a similar situation, a coding pattern or whatever, oh yeah, I should have used a hash set instead of a dictionary, let's say, or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
So you learn along the way. And so you really get two things here. You get a door open that was otherwise closed to you, and you learn how to do this yourself. So you learn, and the impossible becomes possible.
That's awesome. And I think you mentioned Azure DevOps, or your work tracking system. I was just given an AI-driven development demo earlier today, and I had to copy and paste in from the work tracking ticket. Is this already in the box, or is this an extension to come where it can read from the issue that you're working on in Azure Boards?
I forget whether the MCP server is in yet for Azure DevOps.
Okay.
It might be. There is some integration already where you get like the Git tooling will help you if you hit the pound sign, it will autocomplete based on your ticket numbers and stuff. And so there is already kind of a plug between the two systems, and I think if it's not in, it will be in.
That
just like it is with
huge.
GitHub.
I mean,
yeah.
Okay, we're used to right-clicking on the issue and saying create branch from this issue in Azure Boards, and then I refresh Visual Studio or check out the branch, and the simplest it could get would be I'm on a branch that has the issue number, it's tied to that issue, and I just say go, and it reads all the information and the chat history of preparing that particular issue in Azure Boards, which is everything that I would read if I'm hand coding everything myself, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's multiple degrees to this, right? You can there's the coding agent, the one that's on GitHub, for instance, or in Visual Studio, where you can say, hey, do this work for me. Keep me along, show me what you're thinking and where you go through it, and don't pull the trigger before I say go, right? Show me what you want to do first.
Yep.
Or finish with a pull request, and then I'll review the pull request. But don't, so that's one way. That's where you it's autonomous. You let it kind of go on its own. The other one is like, you could say, hey, I have, I'm going to work on bug number 1, 2, 3. Help me prepare me for that, right? And then, the AI can come and say, hey, it looks like it's going to be in these 3 files. Let me open them for you. Here's how you may want to look at this. And here's something that might help you understand the context, because all this context switching is expensive. Right. So it might be super helpful that the AI can come and bring you up to speed on context real quick. So I think there's a spectrum of how deep you want this integration to be.
So if Visual Studio 22 was all about largely the switch in x64, would it be mostly correct to say that this new version of Visual Studio is laying the foundation for the era of AI-driven development?
Yes, that is one of the things. Yep. But it's much more than that. It's not just that. So it's also a complete overhaul of the UI.
Okay.
So full modern, fluent design language, new icons, and the old Visual Studio 2022 looked a little old. So this new one, it's super crisp, very modern. It just feels fantastic. And then on top of that, there's a bunch of performance optimizations that have gone into it. Like we moved a lot of stuff off the UI thread, so you won't see these little micro freezes or even longer freezes or hangs, as we call them, because things have moved into like background processes that run .NET Core and whatnot. And so it's a much lighter experience. It feels like you have this modern UI and everything is responsive all the time. And solution loads faster, Visual Studio starts up faster, F5 is faster. So you get to hitting that breakpoint when you want to debug something is like much faster than it was before. So it feels like nimble, light on its feet, beautiful. And so we've given like you and other MVPs like a month early access to kind of the previews, if you will. And the feedback we've gotten the most are, this is beautiful. And the other one is the performance is amazing.
Yeah. And
so when you combine those two things, you get that kind of lightweight feeling, which is almost new for Visual Studio, right? And it's absolutely glorious.
And I can corroborate that. Just opening some multi-100,000 line, it's noticeably faster than Visual Studio 22.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear it, that you have the same experience. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, so those are those are my favorite features, I think. Areas, the AI foundation, the new UI, and then the speed. And we just started when it comes to performance. This is the first release on the preview here, or insiders as we call it now. And so the first insider built, there's going to be others before we ship the final one, the final version of the stable 2026. And the performance is just going to be better on the way there and beyond. We're not going to stop. And so it's really a testament to it, and a testament to the team and the effort they put into it. And also to the users that repeatedly told us, hey, the performance is an issue. We hear that, right? And we've heard it all the time, a long time and a lot. And we always make it better. We can tell that we are getting better all the time for years, but it's a general thing. Mm-hmm. So your mileage will vary because not two solutions are the same. So your solution has like 25 projects. Some of them are C++, some of them are SAML in WinUI, and some of them are, APIs and .NET Core and .NET Frame. So whatever the makeup is all impacts load times and hangs and all this type of stuff differently. And so it's different for everybody, but we can see through telemetry that we are getting better on all the metrics, and we have for like years, but it's nothing compared to what we're seeing now. Now it's like the perceived performance is markedly different, which is the only performance metric that really matters at the end of the day. Do you feel it's faster or not? And right. So this is the release that really makes that huge jump. Yeah.
And when compiling your entire Visual Studio solution, is it true that performance is all based on the SDK rather than the actual Visual Studio tool, or does Visual Studio have something to do with that Control-Shift-B experience?
Yeah. It doesn't just shell out to MS Build.
Okay.
Because let's take .NET. So it has MS Build, right? You use MS Build to build .NET projects, whether it's .NET Core or .NET Framework or whatever. But think about Roslyn. In order to build a C# project, Roslyn has to create a workspace and understand your entire code base, and then it can compile it into, when you're in Visual Studio, Roslyn is running constantly. That's what gives you IntelliSense, is that Roslyn already has parsed everything in your project in order to give that IntelliSense and errors show up in the error list and all that type of stuff. So there's already a bunch of work already done. It would be slower if we would just ignore that and tell MS Build, hey, can you go build this without any prior knowledge of any of this stuff? And so there is an optimization that happens where Visual Studio is faster to use than just use MS Build on the command line for repeated stuff.
Okay. Should people see their existing Visual Studio solutions compile faster in VS26?
Yes, they should. Okay. And so that's a real nice benefit with all these optimizations. So the relationship between Visual Studio and MS Build has been improved, and MS Build itself is also faster. So it's across the board. And we've actually turned AI inside on Visual Studio itself to find performance optimizations, and it's led to some interesting finds. We actually found an issue or a performance opportunity in .NET Framework itself. So as we go deeper and deeper into profiling data, when we run stuff, we can see, this is actually a thing that happened deep in like .NET Framework 4.8. And then it's like, is there a way we can service that? Fix that and service that. So it's funny how you start seeing these things that, you just couldn't see them before. Mm-hmm. And so AI kind of helps with that. And that's really interesting. Another thing we're looking at is, so Nick from the Profiler team, he's the guy working on the Profiler itself and the AI integration. And so he's been looking at the top NuGet packages, like the top 100. And see, hey, can he profile them, see where there's some benefits that can be made? And then he sends pull requests. So you can imagine like the most popular NuGet packages, they're being used by thousands, if not millions of running apps and websites. Right. So fixing performance issues in some of those have huge implications to not just developers, but to end users using .NET apps. And so not only can we face them inwards, we can also face them out and work with the community. And so there's already a bunch of pull requests being sent and accepted around the world, really, for all these packages. So it's pretty phenomenal. And it goes to that whole thing where the door is being opened that was before closed, and love it.
So the new Profiler, which y'all been using internally for a while, dogfooding it, you're now turning it to popular NuGet packages, which are run by tons and tons of .NET applications. So you should start seeing just .NET applications everywhere getting free performance improvements as they just upgrade libraries.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice.
And then hopefully it doesn't end with us. Like hopefully other people will start using the profiler agent and do the same for more packages or for other aspects of the same packages. So
now you call this a profiler agent. What exactly does that mean? Is it something that's running kind of on the side, or is it something that you have to click a button for?
Yeah, you can like invoke it. You ask the profiler agent literally in chat. So agents are behind the @ sign. So if you type an @ sign in the chat box in the Copilot chat window, hit the @ symbol, you get a list of available agents. So there's the GitHub agent for working with like pull requests and issues and whatnot. And there's a bunch of different ones. You can install more. You can also use the profiler. So profiler comes up. So you can just say, hey, @profiler, help me performance optimize my application. And so it'll run the profiler. It knows the context of the profiler and Visual Studio. And that's that deep integration I'm talking about. And so it can start profiling. It can write benchmark using benchmark.net. It can so it's highly scientific. It doesn't just guess that this would be better. It will measure it. And so it'll write the benchmarks if you don't have any. It will come up with a list of suggestions to how to improve performance. It will then run the benchmarks again and tell you what the effect was. And it can, and then you can run your unit tests. Do they still work? And so on and so forth. So you're, safe in trying this out. And then maybe there's one of the suggestions that was too hard for you to understand. Like I'm not very low level. So like if it suggests I do something unsafe C# using the unsafe keyword, like I personally, I don't know what that is. I don't know what kind of trouble that would get me into. I don't understand it. I've never learned it. Yeah. So I could tell it, hey, please don't use that approach. Is there another approach you can use that doesn't involve unsafe C#? And so it might say, yes, here's another way. And they can run benchmark and say, oh, I didn't get as much benefit, but you still get a lot faster than I was. Do you want me to proceed? So yes, please. So it opens that door and it walks you in that door with it. Okay. So now you learned more about this stuff too. And that's a beautiful thing. As more and more people do this, we should just see performance everywhere go up. This is one of those magic moments, I feel like. Performance is such a hard thing to do, a hard thing to do right, because you have to do it scientifically. You have to measure. And it's like, okay, well, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Well, now we know.
Well, and it made me think of MAUI applications as well, because if you're running in the emulator locally on Windows, it's like, well, now you can, the Windows bound performance tools, but that's, then you run it on iOS and none of those tools will connect to the running process on iOS. Yeah, it's a hard problem.
Yes, it really is. And you have to have a running app to do profiling. So it has to be it's a real world scenario. You run it and you click the buttons and it'll then tell you what about what you just did took a long time and allocated more memory than it had to, and so on. So
I want to circle back to AI-driven development, because you mentioned a number of things with so many more tools, and you mentioned the different agents with the @ symbol. And I just quickly tested VS22, and you put in the @ symbol, and I get 3 options that come up on my end. And so you're saying that's going to expand. You're going to have more there. So many organizations, have systems and databases and whatnot. Is there either already or going to be support for opening up, like development databases or wikis behind the firewall, or just basically whether it be a tool or an MCP server to open up, private things to the context window of Copilot? And how does that work?
Yeah, that is what MCP servers are designed to do. Like you can take things that are like on-prem that requires authentication, to your network or whatever, to your bug database or knowledge base wiki or whatever it might be, and you can have an MCP server that expose that to the LLM to use that as context, for instance, and be able to understand and call the tools too. You can have tool calling, so you can have certain command line things that only exist in your org or whatever that it can call, or or URL, whatever it might be. It can execute that, and you can write that. You can give it those abilities yourself. So it can be super specific.
So, all right. So somebody just downloaded VS26, they've installed it, and they hear you say that, and it's like, great. I want to do that. What do I do?
Go check out the tutorial. We have a MCP server project template too. File new MCP server, right? And you can do that in C#, write an MCP server and plug it into whatever backend system you've got. If you have an old mainframe or whatever, go for it. And there's really no limits to this at all.
And so when you use that template, what your recommendation? Where should that run? Does it run on the local developer box? Do you need to actually have a separate server to host it? What tends to be a good practice there?
I don't know if we've seen like kind of a best practice around this emerged yet. I mean, it is fairly new, all this stuff. But there's a couple of options, so you can run it locally. So we don't have it yet, but we will have it very soon. A way for you to wrap an MCP server up in an extension. So you could have people install an extension, and boom, that will also have that MCP server, right? Which could be a console app or something running. But you can also have a remote endpoint. And so remote could also be an internal endpoint, like a URL. And you can point to that. So you can have it either local running, or you can have like one central server somewhere internally in your org or out on the web for everyone else to use. Completely up to you. And all of it is supported.
So that sounds like it'd be very likely that we would be seeing some extensions for Jira, extensions for UTrack, because the vendors would say, well, I want that to be available.
I bet you it already exists. If it doesn't, it might be in preview or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. All these vendors where there's clearly some development relevant information that needs to get into the context window of Copilot, just as if it was a privately hosted wiki.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
So those are gonna show up all over the place. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of those.
Right. And there's so many people with really, really old databases where providing them with a read-only connection string would really help in documenting or analyzing that very large and sprawling legacy database by allowing GitHub to actually, pull in schema information about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's no end to this. Like old databases. It could literally be anything. It's kind of mind blowing, and there's going to be an explosion of this happening. We're on the forefront of all this, right? This is happening right now. It's happening in real time. And as I said, like best practices don't even exist yet on some of this stuff. That's how new it is.
Yep.
And it's crazy that it's so new and so uncharted territory still to an extent, yet so much of it is available. Like in such small amount of time, this explosion happened. And so it's like, that's new, we're not used to this type of explosion.
Yeah. I don't think the internet was adopted this fast.
Right.
So on closing out, you had mentioned the agent built into Copilot that it can just kind of run off the side and work on a feature branch and provide either a plan or a pull request. Is that type of capability coming even if all of your work is not in GitHub issues? Because there's so many people who their work is either in Jira or their work is in Azure boards, and they don't want to move their work tracking to GitHub just to get that. What are the plans or the strategy there?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get that quite a lot. That works. If you want to unleash the coding agent to do work for you and send a pull request or whatever, you can do that in Visual Studio. And so it doesn't matter what source control provider you got. If you're using Bitbucket or GitLabs or GitHub or ADO or whatever you're using, it'll work because it works within Visual Studio. So, GitHub has the GitHub Copilot running on GitHub. In order to use that one on the github.com website, you have to use github.com. But if you use it within Visual Studio, it doesn't matter where your code is source control is hosted. If you use Git, then Visual Studio know how to, create a branch and do things.
Well, the difference is the one running in Visual Studio, you're kind of babysitting. And the one running on GitHub, it's whenever it thinks it's finished, you're going to get some commits on a feature branch, right?
Yeah, you can have the one in Visual Studio. It's an agent, so you can instruct it to do different things. You can say, hey, don't bother me, go out and figure this out and send me a pull request when you're done.
It can go as far as... But you can also say,
hey, I want to ride along.
Okay. So what's the workflow if you want to, say, get 3 features going on 3 separate feature branches and have 3 instances of it go? Do you have to have 3 instances of Visual Studio and 3 cloned working copies, or is there another configuration?
I think technically you can do it all in one instance of Visual Studio. Like you can have you can start multiple chats, but I think I would personally probably do it in an instance each, just to keep it separate, so I don't lose control over what's happening.
Well, I'd want them on 3 separate feature branches, right?
Then you want, in that case, you want it on different instances.
So you'd have to clone it to 3 different directories because a directory can only be on one branch at a time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right. That's true. So
yeah, I mean, if I have a really powerful computer, fast internet, and I've got the pro GitHub account, it's like, well, how do I optimize my own workflow for being really specific about the spec and the requirements? And let me get how many of these can I get going?
So that's one approach of doing it. That so far, that's not kind of what I see.
Okay.
I see more the type of work that's being done is more of I don't have time for this little bug, or I can't prioritize this feature request. But it's of a nature that I think the AI can actually do a pretty good job here. It doesn't require, like, let's say, big architectural thinking and moving things around. And so it would be a good candidate such that when I get a pull request from the agent, I'm not getting something that takes me like 2 days to go through, but it's like pretty easy for me to see whether or not I like it or not. And we can go back and forth, or I can just take it. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a little bit of a learning curve there to figure out, first of all, which of the LLMs, there's a bunch of models out there. Which of them do you prefer? A lot of people like the Claude model right now. But, the landscape changes. So who knows what it is, in 2 weeks or whatever. But let's say that's the one you use. And then you figure out, well, what type of issue or feature request is it well suited for? Am I well suited for reviewing? And so you figure this out. And so I feel like your velocity is going up because you can kind of hand the AI these kind of tasks that you can kind of easily merge in. And you wouldn't have time to prioritize them otherwise. And so you now get more done, but you can concentrate on the stuff that requires the architecture stuff and the deep thinking and the creative process and whatnot. So it feels nice that it's that way. So your velocity goes up. You can concentrate on the more fun things of programming and let the kind of the boring stuff, let the AI take care of that to whatever degree you're okay with.
It's interesting that you described it as the fun part of programming, and it goes hand in hand. In my experience, Copilot is really good at doing something that's been done before, and there's an existing pattern that it can match against. And that means that I've done it before. And if I was to do it personally myself, it's kind of okay, let me get through this. Yes, I know exactly how it needs to turn out. I've been there. I've done that. And yes, great candidate. Okay, can the computer just handle that? Whereas if there's a new pattern, if the pattern doesn't exist, if it's not in the code base, well, then you think, well, what's Copilot going to match against? The public internet? Well, that's new and novel. It tends to be fun for software engineers because it's fresh, it's new.
Right. Yeah. So you can also use it as kind of a companion to bounce ideas off of. So you can say, hey, Copilot, if you were to build this new feature that has new architectural stuff that we haven't done before, what could be an interesting way of handling that? Yeah. And so you can have a conversation where it's like, hey, maybe if you split this class into 2 and you create the service pattern over there and create a factory over here, and then you get like a fresh perspective from someone else, and it makes you think, and then you can say, oh no, I think actually the factory pattern was the better one for this case. Let's go down that path and explore that a little bit, and you can continue that conversation. So it gives you that kind of it's a chat buddy that has a buddy that you can bounce ideas off of, and that understands the full context of your code. And so it's different from if you went to like ChatGPT and just talked to the website, it wouldn't have that same context of all your code and all that type of stuff. And so it's kind of nice that it's right there. You kind of have it where you normally are in Visual Studio. So I feel like there's a whole spectrum we can use the AI, from the idea stage, and some people do all the way to vibe coding, where they do big features and they just let the agent loose, right? And that's fun, and that explores new ideas, and is great for that type of stuff. But it's a spectrum. So whatever you're comfortable with, or whatever the situation calls for, you pick your place on the spectrum that you like, and then you go from there. Yeah.
And if it doesn't, maybe it already exists. It's been a couple of years since I wrote an extension, so maybe I'll do another one if it doesn't. Maybe it does. Is there already a hotkey that just auto focuses with the microphone enabled so I can just hotkey, speak, hit go.
Well, there's a Windows H brings up.
I do that all the time.
Windows H. Okay. But you're talking specifically for the chat window in.
Well, I find myself, my workflow is I'm somewhere in Visual Studio, and now I need to get the cursor in the chat window, which there's a hotkey for that, and then I need to do Windows H, and then there's the little 1.5 to 2 second where Windows spins that up, and then it speaks and transcribes, and then hit go. But it seems like that right there would be an amazing extension just to have just automatic microphone listening.
It's there. Well, not the microphone. So I have one called voice typing. And so you need a keyboard shortcut just to bring the cursor into the chat window input box. And it's there. I'm trying to find it. It's there. And then I have this thing called voice typing. And I think you just hold Control and Shift down. And if you hold it down for a second, it starts listening and just say whatever. And wherever the cursor is, it starts just producing text in there. So something like that. I don't know if that's exactly what you were thinking, but
that's pretty darn close. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not using AI for the speech recognition. Okay. It's using the built-in WinRT stuff, which is you have to manually add punctuation and stuff. So so you have to say period, and then go and do this comma. You don't have to do commas, I guess, but it's right. If it was AI, it would know how to put in the right grammar and stuff so that it's better at understanding what you're saying.
Somebody listening is going to integrate all that stuff.
The reason I use the WinRT is because it's built into Windows 11. It's free, right? It's I don't need an LLM in the cloud to do the speech processing.
Right. And I think that should be fine because do the prompts care too much about punctuation? I don't know.
Oh, that's the beauty of it. You can do typos, and it's really great. I love that I can kind of write at the speed of thought and don't have to be slowed down by having to do correct grammar or something. That's pretty nice.
That's what I think. AI-driven development is programming at the speed that we can think. I think that's the promise.
But there's that, there's still that grammar trap with the, let's eat grandma.
Right, yeah.
That grandma? Comma is important.
Right, exactly. Well, this is awesome, man. I had so much fun today just listening to the behind the scenes strategy and thinking for VS26. And so for listeners who haven't already downloaded it, where should they go? Regular visualstudio.com?
Yep, visualstudio.com. Click the download link and then choose the insiders. We've renamed preview to insiders, and we're going to have some more information coming as, naming 2026 insiders. We have some new naming stuff that's coming, more information down the line. So if you want to keep up to date with that stuff as well, tune into the blog, the Visual Studio blog. And
Fantastic. And I can hear some people already jamming out their own custom MCP servers for their internal systems.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this information with us. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a blast.
My pleasure. And until next time, dear listener, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure and DevOps podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Visit our sponsor, ClearMeasure, at www.clearmeasure.com. And on behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.